Today, I wanted to talk about a story of when I kind of realized that my dad's early onset Alzheimer's was leading to a place where he really wasn't any remnant of himself anymore, or it was starting to disappear and the seriousness of the disease was kicking in. And not that it wasn't before, but we could still like reach to him. He was still there. We could still do relatively normal things up until this point, at least with me. My dad and I grew up with my dad always showing me movies and watching TV shows, and that was like our thing. We bonded over that. And it was just really awesome. And he definitely is what made me love movies and has made me want to pursue working in that industry, even though he didn't really work in it himself or anything of that manner. He just his love for movies and stuff like that just really inspired me. That was like our big thing that we did together. We would, always watch movies at night and stuff like that. And even like he would just always be watching stuff. Like that was his main form of entertainment. And there's so many movies I haven't even seen that were of his favorites, and that's like an aspect of him that I can still hold on to and still experience certain things that I might not have watched that he was a fan of. In the first few years of Alzheimer's, that didn't really change. It doesn't really require too much, mental fortitude to, watch a movie, especially the ones that he had seen before. Like, it was almost like a muscle memory, like he remembered that stuff. As the years went on, he kind of started to understand them less. You couldn't really get him onto, like, new movies and stuff like that. So it was kind of a waning experience. So he would still always watch movies, especially like ones that he, grew to love. A few late term ones that he loved were like Doctor Sleep and Rocket Man. Like those were two that stuck out, even though he was in the middle of Alzheimer's. Like something about those stuck out, and he really liked them, which I found super interesting. What I wanted to talk about today was kind of a story that revolves around that shared experience between the two of us, and it's like one of the foundational stuff in our relationship. And when I realized the Alzheimer's was kind of taking that away, I don't remember the exact circumstances. All I remember was this was maybe like the summer of 2020, so still in the throes of the pandemic, but there was that weird like lull in the middle, so you could still kind of do stuff. But for some reason, my mom and sister went out, and I was with my dad alone. And I had just gotten a Blu-ray of the movie Cloverfield. One of the things that's tough with Alzheimer's, especially, is you just got to kind of keep them entertained, because they'll just wander and or constantly ask you questions because they'll forget like what's going on. So they'll it's like taking care of a kid. This is another aspect of stuff that I want to talk about at some point, but it's like keeping a kid entertained. So I said, oh, I just got this movie, so let's watch this movie. And I put it on, and I wasn't really thinking. I mean, we watched horror movies together in the past. It wasn't like the big bastion of what we watched. Not because he was afraid of them or anything. It was honestly more me who was afraid of them up until a few years ago. So for those who don't know, Cloverfield is like a found footage film. So it's kind of like a documentary style. So it's this big kaiju monster like movie from the perspective of found footage. So it feels very real and stuff like that. And I wasn't thinking about it. And we were watching the movie, and I thought it was going fine. I don't know. The reason why movies became kind of like a with Alzheimer's became kind of like a just set to silence. Like, it would relax the whole situation, and it would be a reason to just sit down and do nothing for a while. So I wasn't really paying attention to my dad, who was sitting beside me. And we were reaching the end of the movie, and there was a lot of disaster stuff happening. Like, I think this is the scene where they try to go up to the skyscraper and go find the girlfriend in the apartment. And it's very realistic. But obviously you're watching a movie, so you're not thinking about it. And my mom and sister come back from wherever they were, and they walk in, and they're like, oh, you got to turn it off. You got to turn it off. He's crying. And I look over, and my dad is like crying, and not in the way, my dad is a crier at movies, but this was like different. This was like he was scared crying. And in that moment, I kind of realized, like, oh, he thinks this is real. Like, he thinks this is a real thing that's happening. And in that moment, I kind of realized, like, oh, is this it? Are we done watching movies? And I know Cloverfield is kind of a specific example because it is supposed to imitate reality. And going back to the kid thing, if you showed a movie to a kid, he'd probably think it was real too. And I just wasn't thinking in that mindset. So in that moment, I kind of realized that the way we watched movies was over. I'd have to cater it to him. And it was tough. It was like a big part of our relationship that had to change. And after that moment, it just kind of never was the same, unfortunately. He wouldn't really get movies, or there were weird instances where my family and I have talked about this, where he would have like Law and Order on as his like comfort show. But he would be like inches away from the TV when we weren't paying attention, and he would be like talking to the people thinking he was like in the show, that it was real. So it became this thing where we just couldn't really, if it was not something he was familiar with, he couldn't watch it, because he would just, his something in his brain, he would, the differentiator between this is fact and fiction was just gone. Unless it was something familiar to him. And as Alzheimer's went on, you realize kind of that the only things that stick are the stuff that's familiar to them, and you can't really have any new experiences. So it's sad. I don't really know what the grander point of this is, but I think that's just kind of an interesting aspect of Alzheimer's. There's a lot of weird things that happen that are really hard to explain. And I don't even know if it's unique to me, but I know that movie watching was such a big aspect of his life. And reading, too. This is a whole other thing. He couldn't read. He desperately wanted to, but he just couldn't do it. You lose everything when you have Alzheimer's. His favorite things, he couldn't read. He couldn't do anything. It's so devastating because you get so bored. There's nothing to do. You can't consume the things you once enjoyed. And I think that's an aspect of Alzheimer's that's under discussed, because imagine if you couldn't do all the things you love to do anymore. It's not that you're just losing memories, you're losing all the things you used to be able to do. And that's what Alzheimer's takes away from you. And I think that needs to be discussed about more. You need to sympathize with your loved ones who have it, because in reality, they don't have a lot they can do. And you could try your best to make up for that, but it's tough. And sometimes I wish I did more, but in reality, it's just the nature of the disease, unfortunately. And at some point, he forgot even what movies are. You know, that didn't really happen until he moved into the nursing home. But that's the point of my story, is that just empathize with the fact that people who suffer from this are also losing the ability to do the things that they love to do, even in the most mundane things like watching movies. If you watch this, thank you for watching. I mean, I'm just going to keep making these. If people watch them, good. If not, that's fine. This feels really good for me to vent. It's like the ability to talk to people without seeing the reactions so or in person. So I enjoy it. But yeah, that's it. Thank you.